we're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to mention Field Service Live. If you haven't heard about it, every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. So that would be 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That is a live show broadcasted on YouTube. It is me and guests. I usually have guests. Every Thursday night, we broadcast live for at least an hour. Sometimes the show goes a couple hours, depending on what we're talking about and depending on what kind of questions we're getting. Really, there's no time limit. But if you would like to watch me live, communicate with me live on various topics related to field service business management, then please join me. You can go to YouTube, search for Field Service Live. It's YouTube/Field Service Live, and sign up, hit the subscribe button. We do not talk about Total Office Manager software. In fact, we work really hard not to tout Aptora and not to tout our software. It's a completely separate show. It deals with this field service management business. That's you, anybody that drives vehicles to buildings and makes repairs and installs and maintains is field service. And that's what we talk about. So please join me again, 7 p.m. Central Time, Field Service Live on YouTube. Let's go ahead and get started. Just wanted to remind everybody Erica is on with me. She'll be answering your questions live if you just type them in. And if she needs me to help answer the question, like show something on my screen, then I will certainly do that. Thankfully, she is a great typist because she lost her voice and she won't be able to talk to us today, unfortunately. All right. Should be seeing my screen now, Erica. I'll let you know if there's a problem with my screen. Again, we're going to be talking about building and modifying custom report styles in the software. There is a great help topic on this. Let me bring this over here. So if you can see that. Eric, I think you mentioned there's an echo on my side. Is that right? Oh, echo with other people maybe. Okay. All right. Here is the help topic. You can go search for the help topic, or you can see that URL. Of course, this is recorded, so you'll be able to see that on the recording more carefully. You can pause it and look at it. But there really is a great help topic on this subject. I will scroll down and just show you how large it is. I don't think it's large because the feature is necessarily that complicated. It's large because we tried to be really thorough. We could have written half this much, but for those of you that like lots of information and details, we really tried to include everything we could think of. And I'll be referring to this help topic later to show you how you would use it to look up certain information and figure out how certain fields work and can be configured. First thing I want to do is talk about where can you customize reports. If you go to the reports menu and look at these reports, they're not customizable any more than the preferences and settings that are available here. So these can't be customized any more than what you see on that screen. Again, anything in this menu, if you were to open up the, say, audit trail report, the preferences that are available here are the only way that you can customize the output. But if you wanted to create your own report using audit trail information, or you wanted to create your own income statement type of report, then you could do that using the custom data views feature. If you click custom data views, a form will open, and under the data views menu, you will see the various data sources. And that's the way to think of these as sources of data, like employee monthly stats for last year, employee monthly stats for this year, employee payroll setup. So there is employee payroll setup. What would that be? Well, that would be all the information that we could think of related to setting up payroll. And you would click this columns button, and it would quickly show you all the information that's available to you here. Now, why would you use this? Let's say you go to reports and you go to payroll and you go to payroll setup here, and you immediately go, what? This is it? This is all the options I have? Well, that's all the options that we thought you would need for this report. We really didn't think that anything else was needed, or no one has really asked for anything else. So we thought this was adequate to set up your employees. And you may find this not adequate. So if that's the case, then you would go to the custom data view, and again, reports, custom data view, and you would open up the data view called payroll setup. And again, where did I find it? Let's go down to payroll setup. Oh, I couldn't find it. That's because it's called employee payroll setup. By the way, we're going to add a search to this. We have added so many data views, more than we ever thought we would ever add, by the way, that we really need to add a search. So we're going to be adding a search, a better search to this so you can find what you're looking for quickly. Anyway, here's employee payroll setup. So I click that, and I got this list here. And if you're interested in what's in the list, then you can click columns and you'll see that right there. Now, one important thing to remember about custom data views is the sorting. It's really important how you sort this, because the sorting will usually be carried over to the report that you're building, because the report builds off this list. So the first thing you want to do is populate the list and then decide on sorting. You'll sort by this and sort by that. So let's say we sort by full name, then maybe we sort by date of birth, and then something else, date hired. Click OK. So the sorting is important. Also, the columns that you have here don't change the report. When you go to build the report, which I'll show you in a minute, it doesn't matter what columns you have on here. All of this information will be available to you, but the sorting does matter. And then you can use the quick filter to filter this list even further so that you filter out data from years that you don't want to deal with, or names or departments or whatever that you don't want to deal with. Now, once you have this list looking the way you like it, you can go to reports and you can go to setup. Now, let's just get these out of the way before I go any further. Print list, that would print this report, or this list rather, right here. Nothing special. Just what you see is what you get. Preview would preview what you have here. And print would print out the report, or pardon me, the grid. So let's go to print setup, or report setup. If you had built any reports prior to this, they would be listed here. Anybody in your company that builds a report, they'll be listed in here. So, Erica, by the way, I think you wanted to clarify something. I think I said something wrong about the print setup. You don't have to say it, but just type it. Did you have some comment on that? Maybe not. All right, so we're going to go to setup. Again, if you had built reports, they'd be here. Click add new to build a new one. Now, if you open this and there's nothing there, that's because we haven't built you a starter report. We could have built you a starter report and you would see it in here. In this case, we're dealing with a blank canvas. I'll expand that, make it bigger. This middle area right here is where you design the report. This area over here on the left is where you get your fields. Now that comes from those columns that we looked at earlier. These are all the different fields that are available to you. And you just drag them out onto the report area. And then once you've done that, I'll do that. We'll do begin date right there. Once you highlight that field, you'll notice properties show up here on the right-hand side. And those properties allow you to control the look and, in many cases, the behavior of that field. So this is a data field, not a text box. You might see that it says begin date. That's not a label. That is the begin date for an employee. We don't know what employee yet because we haven't brought that employee's name over here. But it says begin date. That's the way that you can identify what it is, but that's the data, not the label. If you wanted to add a label, you'd come up to the toolbar and click a label, and then you can add a label like that. Now, one thing that's a little strange about the way we built this is that you can't just double click in here and change that word label. And that's a little strange because every other program I've used, pretty much every other program I've used, allows you to do that. We're going to do that eventually, but we didn't do that when we built this. So you have to click the caption area and type something in like date employment began. And that might be your label. Now you'll have to hit enter and it changes. Now we can resize it and put that right there. So now we have a label and we have the actual data. Save often. When you build your report, save often. Hit that save button quite a bit because if something gets messed up, you can exit and say no to saving it. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click exit and say no to saving it. Remember, save often. That way, if you mess it up, you'll say no. You can also save as to make copies. But I want to go to a report that's already got some a template built in it so that we can learn from that. Let's go down to, let's do the pseudo wage. Scroll down here. That's timely. State unemployment tax. While we don't have your states in here, we do have a pseudo wage summary that would allow you to build one for your particular state. Here in Kansas, we built one that matches exactly the form that Kansas uses. Again, when I click that, you'll notice it populated with a bunch of information. Year-to-date wages, employees' names, etc. You want to be careful who can access these custom data views, right? Because this could contain information you may not want them to be able to get to. To restrict the access or to grant access, I should put it that way, people don't have access to these by default. Nobody can get to these by default. If you want to give somebody access, as usual, you would go to the user list security form, pick their name, and maybe jump down to, if you wanted to, the custom data views section. This would be a list of all the custom data views that you have downloaded. More on that in a minute. And this is where you would grant them permission to see them. Otherwise, they would not see those. All right, so we click the columns button. Again, that's a quick way of seeing what's available. We would sort this however we need to. And why don't we sort it by, say, employee name, then by maybe, doesn't matter, year-to-date total wages. Go to reports, setup. Click the drop down. There is no report, so nobody has built one. So we'll click add new. That's all we can do. And now you'll notice a report's been built in here. Sometimes we build a sample report, sometimes we don't. It depends on the situation. Make that bigger. Notice how we can resize these windows. Again, if you hadn't seen this before, on the left-hand side are the available fields to use on the report. These are the data fields. We can draw all the labels we want, but these are the data fields. And you drag them out into the area, as you can see here. Now, this part's real important, and this is covered in the help topic, but this is maybe the most important thing I can tell you. It's really important that we understand how reports are grouped or organized. We have a page header, and I put a large label on there called State Unemployment Report. And you can see there's the text that I put on there. And I set the font name, color, etc., just like you're used to. Click the little button, set your font, color, strike out, underline it, just like what you're used to. I put in a label for period ending, and then I put in a field, a data field that came from over here. So that says period ending, period 2 rather, I meant. And you can see that field is right over here. That's where I got it. So I drug it over there. And then I added some labels to what's called a group header. And we have group header 1. When you go to create a report from scratch, it automatically adds a page header, one group header, one group footer, and one page footer. The page header, as the help topic will explain. So if you come into this help topic and look it over, if you joined us late, we showed you this help topic earlier. It talks about the page header footer concept right there. A report can only have one page header. That page header prints at the beginning of the report on page 1. And it can only have one report footer because, of course, that prints on the footer section at the end of the report. So the header, report header, is at the top of the page, first page. The report footer is at the bottom of the page, last page. Page header would be a header at the top of every page, and a page footer would be at the bottom of every page. We also have group headers and footers, and I'm going to talk about that next. The group is real important, as I mentioned. You have group header 1 by default. You'll see that in there when you go into this report. And what that allows you to do is decide on what information your report will group on. Like you want to group on the employee name, for example. Let's make this area a little bigger. See how I can move these around? So you might want to group on the employee name, or you might want to group on the social security number. The group area, group header 1, allows you to basically create a report for whatever you're grouping on, and that report will appear in the details area. But you can also add a second group, group header 2, and you can group up on something else, and you will have a report within a report. So the report group headers just dictate what information the report centers around or focuses on. I'll come back to that. What you're looking at in the group header are fields, text fields. They were just added using this text field button right up here. They're labels, rather. I should call it a label. That's really what it is, a label. So what I did is I added a label, and then I set the properties. I made it bold, I made it black, I set the font, I adjusted the size, I repositioned it. When I put all these on here, I took my mouse, I held the control key down, I took my mouse and I highlighted all of these. And I right clicked and I aligned them. Here's an alignment tool. I can align them according to the top. So they all are aligned together. Then I needed the data, the information. So underneath the group header, which is the header of the column. Just think of Excel, and that's the label at the top of the column, employee name. Well, I need to put the employee name underneath it. And where did I get it? Right there. I just drug employee name onto this form, like there. And I sized it accordingly. So that's how they got there. Employee name, social security number, quarterly taxable, etc. When you're ready, you can tighten that area up, and at any point you can preview it to see how it's looking. So one thing I've noticed is we have some records with no employee name. What's the employee name? Well, we have to look into where the report's getting that from, but it's taking the first and the last name and putting them together. And I bet you that record doesn't have a first last name. It just has a full name on the print check as, probably. There's the social security number. Of course, that's been jumbled, so there's no real numbers in there. Taxable wages, excess wages, month 1, 2, 3. So it's looking good. I can preview it at any time. I'll go back to the designer and make changes. Now, if you want to total up your report, if you want to total any of the numbers on a report, then you can add a text box, and maybe you can see what I'm pointing at up here. You can add a text box to the report and then set the properties of that report. So let's just double click on the text box, or I can click it once and I can draw it. And then I'll click on it to highlight it. Now, the first thing that I need to do is change the name to something that makes more sense. It says field 21, and I can just type in test. If I right click on it, don't forget there are some options when you right click, such as formatting the border or establishing properties. Now, you'll recognize this from Excel. If you click properties, then you can select the output format. Is it currency? Is it a number? Time, date, percentage, etc., or is it custom? This custom is just like Excel. It works just like Microsoft Excel. And then you can establish the border properties here. So right-clicking gives you some options, but also highlighting it opens up these properties here. And you'll notice that we have a summary, distinct field, summary function, summary group, summary running, summary type. What in the world do those mean? I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? You click this drop down. What is all that? I have no idea. Well, you could experiment. Keep in mind, you could just set these properties and hit preview and see what would happen. And that's what Erica would do, and that's what James would do, me, because that's how we are. I wouldn't ask anyone. Probably to my fault, I wouldn't read anything, and that's probably not good. But I would just be experimenting with it because that's who I am. That's what kind of person I am. I'm going to experiment, and I'll learn a lot more experimenting. But if you don't want to experiment, then you can go back to the help topic, field properties. Remember that these are your field properties over here on the right. You can go to field properties and start reading through them, and you're looking for the summary, whatever thing it was, and you'll notice there's a whole section, a special section. So rather than throw it in here and give you one of those cheap answers that you're used to from typical help topics, the summary fields are covered all by themselves, and those, recognize the funny names, that is the explanation for each one of them, what it does, what its purpose is. If it has different properties, there they are. There's the different properties. So what you can do with these is, with these summary functions, is you can add up numbers. You might want to add up all the months, or you might want to add up the taxable wages. So let's take a look at that and see how we did that. Here is a field for quarterly taxable wages. It's a data field. You can see right there, data field. It came from over here, quarterly taxable wages. But at the bottom, we have a label called subtotal, and right underneath it, we have another field that was added, a text field, and it is used to total up the wages. And how did we do it? Well, let's look at the properties and work our way down. First thing is the data field, quarterly taxable wages, that's what it's totaling. So, in other words, let's go back to the test for webinar right there. The data field hasn't been selected. I'll click the little drop down and I'll scroll and I'll find taxable wages, quarterly taxable wages. So remember, we're using the one from the one we just created a moment ago. I created it by drawing a text field with it highlighted. I came over to properties and I told it, you are going to be a data field. You're going to be looking at quarterly taxable wages. And I'm going to use the summary functions. And again, if I click this one, you can see that's how it was done. Data field, quarterly taxable wages, summary functions, quarterly taxable wages. So the summary distinct field, what are you summarizing? Quarterly taxable wages. Your output format, is it a percentage? No, it's money. So what we can do is click on this and go to currency, just like in Excel. Click OK. We can even type in our own. If you know what you're doing, you can type in your own. The summary function, again, I can go back to the help topic if I want to look at this, but if I'm trying to figure out how to total these and somebody's already done it already, I'll click on that and look. And I can see that the output format's a little different than what I picked, but that's probably okay. The summary distinct field, we click that. The summary function is a sum. And the summary group, what we're summarizing is all the money in group header 1. So we'll go back to this one and we'll make sure that it looks the same. Now we only have one group header. If we had 2 or 3, they would have been in there. So we have sum, group header, and then these values, 1 and 1. What are they? Well, I saw that somebody already used them. So I'm going to just use those. Group, grand total, group, grand total. Reason why I'm showing you it like this is it's the easiest way to learn is to look at what somebody else has done and just go from there. All right, going back to properties, summary type, text, taxable. So that's the text used in that data field. I could change that if I wanted to. It won't affect the output, but I don't need to change it because it makes sense to me. I can change the top, where the top appears manually, or drag it around. So let me show you. I'll drag it down, and now the top became 270. It's counting 270 TWIPs from the top to the bottom. I'll drag it back up. Now it's 90. If I wanted to align it with others, one way to do it is to highlight the other and look at its value, 90, and then click on that one and put the same 90 in there. Vertical alignment, I can change it. Middle, bottom, how is it aligning? The width, I can type a number in. I might want to do that if I'm being exact. Otherwise, I would change the width with my mouse, just dragging it around. So let's click preview again, have a look at that. Down at the bottom, I don't see it. It's not totaling at the bottom. And why not? I bet you know, because page 2. Let's go to page 10. Right there. It's totaling. And notice, by the way, that we have created the same thing again is what was in the report. So we have successfully totaled up all these numbers on the whole report, 10 pages, just like Aptora did. And we did that just by looking at the properties. We didn't have to fully understand them, but we looked at the properties and figured it out. So that's the basis for how to total things. Now, the reason why it's at the very end is that, well, let's just go look. It's at the very end because it's at the group footer and there's only one group. So it's going to print at the end of the group. We only have one group. If we had a second group, it would have printed at the end of group 1, and we would have had a second group, and we could have had the second group total. So how do we add a second group? Well, let's right click and do insert group. And it automatically adds a group header 2 area right there. And then in that area, I could put say state, and then I could have quarterly hours. So that's going to be quarterly hours by state. So that should show the state, quarterly hours. Now, remember, if you get lost here, then you can go to group header 1 and have a look at the way they did it. You can look at the properties here and see how that was done. Output format, summary distinct fields, summary function is 0, none, none. And then compare that with what you've done. And remember, just preview, see what happens. So we're on page 10, or pardon me, page 1 of 10 at the start. We'll just go through the report. Page 10, and we see nothing. So we have no information. Figure out why. Why don't we have information? Well, remember, we have to tell the software in each of these groups what we want to group by. Are we grouping by the employee name or the social security number, the state? We know in group header 1 that they are grouping by the employee name. Because you can tell by the way it previews. So in group header 2, you could group that up by something completely different. Now let's talk about the details area. This will start making more sense. The detail area is where the data is actually coming from or being put on the report. So the group header, this can contain your column names. It doesn't have to. It does contain what you're grouping by. And then once the report creates all of the details related to group header 1, it'll stop. And by the way, those details are put in the details area. Once it finishes group header 1, it will then go to group header 2 and repeat the details by what you're grouping in group header 2. So you could have a report that focuses on this information by employee name, and then after that gets totaled, you could do the whole thing over again by state or by quarter, something to that effect. Now, the instructions or the help topic does talk about that. I mentioned that grouping is the most important thing. Let's go look at that. sections of the report editor, the group header and footer. Reports can be grouped by using group headers and footers with their data field properties set in the database field being grouped on, like customer ID. A report can consist of a single or multiple nested groups, with each group having its own header and footer sections, and you can have up to 32. So you can have up to 32 group headers, and each group header will be considered basically another report. So it'll group those up by whatever you say. All right, I want to talk a little bit more about summarizing these columns here. Earlier, we saw a simple example of how to summarize all of the wages. And what we did is we added a text field from the toolbar. When we clicked on it, the properties became available to us. The data field was real important. The data field, we select the data field that this relates to, this subtotal. The data field relates to month 1. Same as this. Notice the details area has month 1 right there. Same with this. But the difference is that if I click on this, you'll notice some properties are missing and they're different. When I click on this, you'll see the difference. Summary distinct field. We want to summarize a distinct field called month 1. And we can change that field to month 2 if we felt like it. That tells the software that I'm a summary field. I'm related to month 1, that's the data. And what I want to sum up is the month 1 column. The detail is called month 1. And how do I want to sum it up? I have these options. I can average them. I can count them up. I can find the minimum number, the maximum number, and it goes on. So there's a lot in here. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. Some of these you'll never need to know. If you're good with Excel, I mean, you're an advanced Excel user, then this stuff will look familiar to you. You'll be like, oh, I know what count means, etc. Some of it, it's pretty high level, right? You probably never need it, but it's there in case you do need it. Summary group. All right, so you're related to the month 1 data field, fine. You're totaling up month 1. But what group are you working with? Summary group, which one? 1 or 2? Now there's a second one in there. We didn't see it earlier. So you're telling the software, I want to group up header 1, but you could have easily said, I want to group up header 2. Summary running. It can be none, group, or all. It's usually set to group. So you're running total for the group, and that's in the help topic. Summary type. Grand total, page total, subtotal. Most of you are going to want grand total, but you may want to total up the page. So you might put this in a page footer and just total up the page. You might want to subtotal up some things. And then, by the way, you can total up the subtotals. You might be wanting a page count. So for the most part, grand total is the one that's going to be picked, but you have options there. We talked about text, alignment, etc. So that's how you created the subtotals. And you're totaling up the group header 1, and then you could put more in here and total up group header 2, group header 3, 4, and just keep going. All right, I'm going to go to another report. By the way, if you want to use the load list empty feature, it'll prevent you from having to load this entire list at once, because you might come in here and not know really what you're getting at. You come in here to say employee efficiency, and click that, and it doesn't load very quickly, and you're wondering what is going on, well, there's probably a lot of data, and it might be taking a long time. And you get that and say, okay, well, I can't run that. If you go back to data views and do employee efficiency, well, then you don't have that problem. You can still set your sorting and your columns. It just doesn't show you the data because you may not need it. You may not need that data. Let's go to setup, add new. And even though that was empty, we still have our data fields, right? So we can still make our report. Now, the employee efficiency report is a good one to go to. Notice how it's kind of cutting off. So don't forget, you can resize these as needed. All right, so here we have, again, the page header rather, shows up at the top. If I want to reposition it, I notice it wasn't quite tall enough. So I'll fix that. And then we have our group header 1. That's where we put our fields, like the header text fields, the labels. I shouldn't say text fields. I stand corrected. I need to call them labels so we're not confused. This is where we put our labels, just like we would in Excel. So we have a label for the technician, and we have date, etc. Those are just plain old labels. And then under detail, we grabbed fields from over here. We have the transaction date, the date of the invoice, transaction number, and that might be the invoice number if it's an invoice, the name of the customer, the type of transaction, could be a sale invoice, could be a credit. We had to give a partial refund or something. We have hours billed, so hours invoiced, and we have hours paid, TS hours, so that was hours paid from a timesheet, and the difference and the efficiency. So the difference is important. How did we come up with a difference? Well, it looked at hours billed versus hours paid. And how would it know? It's using, again, the summary type of field. So how did it get there? We went up here to text and we drew a field and we gave it a name called, in this case, it was hours. So we will type in hours 2. I'll make it hours 2. That's how that got there. And then the properties, well, we started at the top, data field. What data field is this related to? Build hours difference. It's your build hours difference. Well, so let's actually go over here. Notice we have a field called build hours difference. So you don't have to do the calculation. We did it for you. There'll be times where you will find a calculated field that we have already added for you, and you don't have to bother. Otherwise, what you would have done is you would have set the properties so that it was taking this minus that, and that wouldn't have been difficult to do. But we built this report to have that built in automatically. You won't always see the calculated fields built in automatically. Speaking of that, what about efficiency? That's a simple mathematical formula. But let's look and see if we did that too. So you click on that and you notice the data field is build efficiency percentage. And yes, we added that. How did it get on there? Remember, it was just dragged and dropped right there. So we don't need that one. We don't need that one. That was taken care of for us. And then down here we have subtotals. So this is just a label. When I highlighted it, you'll notice data field is empty. So that's just a plain old label there. Here we have what appears to be a label. How would we know? Data field, work order hours. Okay, so this one is a data field. and we have something called work order hours right there. That's how it got there. So we don't have to total it up either. It was done for us, but we could have done that easily. We would have selected, if we wanted to add one here, we would have selected the work order hours data field, and we would have set these properties under summary to summarize these for us. Same here. We're totaling those up, totaling up the difference, and are we totaling up the percent? No. If you're an Excel user, remember, if you have a bunch of percentages and you want to quote unquote total them up, what you're probably doing is averaging them out. And so how was that done? Well, come down here to the summary functions and notice that the summary function is average. So it's looking at all the numbers above it and it's averaging them out. And that would make sense. So we'll click, remember, save often. If you're building these reports, hit save a lot because we could crash right here. Hit preview and you might crash. There may have a problem. Well, the reason why we have nothing on here is because we don't have anything in that list, but we can still build the report. But if we want to have something on this report, then we need to have something in that list. That just prevents you from previewing it and testing it, which is important, but it doesn't prevent you from building the report. So now that you're ready to test the report, you could open the list empty and you could narrow down the results or try to run it again. Now, I'd be able to run it again if I just restarted, but I purposely ran the system out of resources so I would get that message. All right. Erica, how are we doing? Again, you can just type your answer in, but how are we doing with questions? Okay. But what? I got a but. I have added a notes section. Oh, good. That's handy. All right. A couple things I wanted to talk about um, for this report designer. If you joined us late, you know that these are the fields that you can add to a report. Those are the data fields, like you see here. And these are the properties. And these are the labels, like you would see at the top of a column in Excel. And here's a label at the top. We didn't talk much about the toolbar up here. Pretty much everything that I can remember anyway, everything in this toolbar is also available when you right click. When you right click and you see insert and bring to front and back, I think there's a toolbar representing each one of these options, if I remember right. But it's easy to figure out what you're looking at because you can just hover over these and see what's going on. The one exception is probably the line builder right here, this button. When you click the line builder, it gives you properties of lines that you can add to the details area of a report. And I'm going to come back to that when I go into an invoice in a minute. But you have the ability to use this tool to add vertical lines if you want to have vertical lines that separate these columns of information. The other thing I wanted to show you is under report, we have the edit report info. This is where you can give this report a name, such as a class example. Wait a minute. All right, class example. And give it a good description. My advice on the description is to tell other people, because it may not be you using it, tell other people what the report is all about, what it would be used for, who it might be used. who might use it rather, that type of thing. So give it a description on the purpose of the report and the information that it gives. And then remember, you can come into this report and do a save as and create a very minor iteration of it and then give it a name. So now you've got two versions of it. Also, I wanted to show you page setup. If I click that, I have the ability to establish the top margin, bottom, left, and right margins, and a gutter, just like Word. And what the heck is a gutter? That's in the help topic. So we explain all this. You can mirror the margins. We explain that too. Print settings, page size, orientation, collate, duplex, paper bin. Some of this depends on the printer, of course. Grid settings. This is the design grid. Those little dots you see there, those represent the grid. And it's handy because it allows you to line things up and just helps you with your designing. You can show the grids. You can automatically align controls to a grid so that way it snaps to one of those grid lines. You can decide how wide those columns are, or pardon me, better said, you can decide how much space is between the grids. And do you want to use inches or centimeters? Styles. This is just like Microsoft Word. You can have a normal style, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. You can add heading 5 if you want. And in that way, rather than you set all the properties, font, bold, is it bold or not, that kind of thing, rather than you do all that, you just select the style. So you'd add a label and then you can select the style. Where is that? Forgot where it was. Let's find it together. Style. Where are you? Forgot where the style was. Guess I need to read the help topic. Where's that style selector? I don't know. I would find out. I can find out. Just look around. I'll see the style there somewhere, but that allows you to set the style of the property or of the label if you just knew where it was. I would guess it'd be there, but I don't know. So style, that's what that does. Just like, again, Microsoft Word does that. I would expect to see it in here too. All right, so that takes care of your page setup. You can also export this template when you're finished with it. It will export it into a file with an extension of RPX. You don't really have to remember that, but that's extra credit. And that way you can share that file with someone else. You could give that to another company, a friend of yours. Remember, whatever you build in the designer is available to your company, your whole company file. But if you create a new company file, it won't be in there. The way to get it in there would be to export it and import it. And that's also covered, just so you don't have to write all this down. That's also covered in here. Exporting and importing templates talks about how to do that right there. All right, so let's close that form. No to my changes. Let's look at a complicated one for a minute. Data views. Let's go to, let's see, where was that? Um, Forgot where I put that, or I forgot what that was called. All right, give me just a moment because I really want to find it. It's a good one. Oh yeah, there it is. Estimate over under details. Okay. All right. So, let's unclick that. Hit refresh. Let's load that list. All right. So that list loaded fast. 14,000, almost 15,000 records. It loaded pretty quickly. As you probably know, we generally recommend that you start a job with an estimate. So when you create your sales lead, the next thing to do is to create an estimate. If you get the sale, the estimate that you've agreed on should never ever change. It should remain the same. When you go to order parts, you order through a PO, you receive those items, and you eventually enter the bill for them and pay the bill. And eventually you create an invoice. And it's best to create the invoice from the original estimate. The original estimate never changes. You create an estimate, then you create the invoice from it. The estimate never changes once it's agreed on. And the invoice represents what really happened. On the invoice, you would have the actual labor times, the actual parts, equipment, etc. The estimate could be different. It might have said that you needed 100 feet of pipe and you needed 200. It might have thought you needed 100 hours, but you only needed 80. It might have thought that you needed a widget and you did not need a widget. So when you created the invoice from the estimate, you modified the invoice so that it matched reality. And the reason why you do that is because you have available to you a great report called Job Estimate versus Actual. And it can be summarized or detailed out. And that'll tell you exactly where things went wrong. Hint, labor, almost always labor. So the more you divide out your labor, like labor for ordering and acquiring materials, labor for staging, labor for tear out, labor for rough in, labor for finish, etc., the more you have labor divided out on your estimate, and you don't have to show that to anybody, the customer doesn't have to see it, then the more the actual versus estimated will help you. But suppose you don't like that report, you're not that impressed with it. Let's look at it. Summary, and let's do last year. I'm not sure what this will show us. Good enough though, it'll show us something. All right, so here's the report. You would have picked a certain job and it would have showed you what you thought would happen and what really happened and the difference. And if that wasn't good, then you'd say, well, I want to know more details. So that would give you an idea of which jobs did not go well. But now that you know what jobs they were, then you might want detailed. And here's the detailed. So we would maybe pick an entire date range and go find a customer. And I probably won't have anything. Oh, I did. You would be able to see all the inventory parts that you thought you needed, the non-inventory parts, the labor you needed, the discounts you thought you would give, and then you would see what really happened. And this is just a fantastic report. It's part of job costing. It's no extra work. No extra work. I saw somebody on Aptora Pros, I think it was yesterday, say, oh, we don't use your software for job costing. But wow, why not? Because it's no extra work. If you would just create estimates, invoices, POs, and all those other things, then you get all these reports for free. No extra work. There's no work that goes into this. Nobody did anything extra. It was just bookkeeping. But let's say you're not impressed. The report's not good enough. You called tech support. They don't care. Nobody cares. James doesn't care. You can build your own. You would just go to reports, setup, click add new. I've already done one, but you can click add new. And here you'll see a template. And you'll be like, oh, thank you, Lord. There's a template to get me started. And you'll see that it'll look just like this. Let me resize this stuff here. Make that a little wider so I can see the properties. Okay, so what are you looking at? You're looking at a report header, and there is no report header. You're looking at a page header, and it says schedule of position, blah, blah, blah. So that's going to be at the top of every page. So we didn't even use a report header, but that's okay. And the report footer is down here. So apparently we're not totaling anything up on a page by page basis. We're doing it at the end of the report. Let's look and see. Open these up to see if that's the case. Yeah, so what we're doing here is we're putting at the top of every page this label, at the top of every page these column headers, and underneath them the data fields, which came from over here, the data fields appear here. And then at the end of the report, we've drawn a couple of lines for looks, and we have started totaling everything up. Estimated gross profit, we totaled all these up. Now, remember the summary related functions. So we've summed it up. Summed up what? Group header. What under the group header? Data called revenue to date. So we're looking at revenue to date within group header 1. We're summing it up, and we're outputting it like that. And it's right there. And we're doing the same basic thing. All right, so let's tighten up these and hit preview. Just have a look. At preview, 10, 11, 12, about 12 seconds. Well, that was 876 pages in 12 seconds. That's not bad. Now here we have the job name. Right there is the job name. And what we're looking at is, let me make this a little bigger for you. Ooh, that's too big. All right, so we're looking at the original agreed to price, contract price, original agreed to. The revised contract price, that came from change orders. So the only way the estimate ever gets changed, remember I said you never change an estimate after it's agreed on. You might have agreed to a change. So we had the original, and then they changed their bathroom. You know, it was bathroom remodeling, and then they changed their mind, wanted tile, not carpet. We put in a change order. That's the revised amount. And then the estimate cost. How much is this job going to cost you total? And then cost to date. How much have you spent so far? And then based on that, how much is it going to cost to complete the job? And what's the percentage of that? And then how much have we billed to date? And if you're running out of money, by the way, if your bank account's getting small, you're hoping that's a zero. That means you haven't invoiced them yet. So it's going to cost you $1,500 still to finish the job, but you got $4,450 coming and you haven't asked for any yet. That's good news. Revenue earned to date, of course, would be none. And then your billing, and that really could be the word invoicing. Remember, it's a bill to your customer, that you're sending an invoice, but when they get it, they call it a bill. Oh, I got a bill in the mail. What's your billings over under? So are you over or under where you should be for sending out invoices? And your estimated gross profit, what's that going to be? And then what's the percent? And so that report would be quite handy, right? Job costing. This is a free report. Comes with job costing. Comes with bookkeeping. You do your normal bookkeeping. You get this for free, no extra work. But again, you could build this. You could have built this yourself. And now you have really a fantastic report in Tom that didn't come with it. And what made it possible is the custom data view, that bunch of data that just filled up in that form, and you taking all these fields, and we didn't use a lot of these fields. We took a lot of these fields and just started building the report. Now that's in there already, so you can go see that. All right, let's say that you want an employee form. You want a form that talks about your employees, and you come in here and you don't see it. So you want the employee name, their start date, maybe the how much they made this year, their social security number, things like that, and you don't see it in here. You would open up your custom data viewer and look for something related to employees or payroll. So we have employee master list. Maybe that's good. So click it, see what happens. Click your columns and see if the columns have all the information you're looking for. And let's pretend they do. To make our report, again, the first thing we would do is filter the report out by department or date range or whatever we want. We can create a user filter, global filter, just like you're used to. You can change the sorting, which is important because you might want to sort it by their full name, then by their department. Maybe their department, maybe their social security number. I don't know why, but probably department. And then go to reports, setup. Click add new and start building. Maybe somebody's already built one for you, though. You can go to report, go to templates, import file. It says import file from Aptora, but it really needs to be changed and just not say anything because it can be from anybody, really. So it said from Aptora. It doesn't matter. I built one called Employee Report Webinar. Double click. And now you got it. So click report, save as, give it a name, last example, and click OK. And now already in use. Well, okay then. I'll make it that. All right, so now we have the report. And again, how did we make it? Well, you probably already know. We have a page header. At the top of every page, we put a label on there, and we set the properties. And if I want to change any of that, I can. And then we had, in the page header place, we had other labels. And how did I add those? Remember, I came over here to label, click that, and just drew it. And then I set the properties over here, just like what you've probably done in other programs. And then I dragged from this area over here, I dragged on there the detail or the fields that I wanted on the report in the details area. So I have the first name, last name, date hired, date of birth, last year's salary, year-to-date earnings, current salary. I could put whatever I wanted on here. Remember, I also could add another group. So I could right-click and do Insert Group, Header, Footer, add a second group, and I could have a report within a report. I know I'm repeating myself from earlier, but just so we're clear, the report will run through all the information that I want to have it run through, and that's dictated in how I group up the information. And then once it's done, I can summarize all of it, total it all up, and then I can have another group of information and another group of information, totaling each group and then totaling all the groups together. So, I mean, you can really get carried away with this. Most of you won't need to. But let's just take a look at the report. This is made up. These people aren't real. But you can see I'd have, let's find a full name. There we go. All right, so I have first and last name. You can see Ashley Adams, date hired, date of birth. She wouldn't tell us. Last year's salary, year-to-date earnings, current salary. And, you might build this report because you want to see how much people make and see who you need to be reviewing. Annual reviews are coming up, and you might review these people every year, every 6 months, and this would give you the date hired so that you could figure out when they need to be reviewed, and it would tell you their earnings and their current salary. And you could add to this their sales commissions. You could have a calculated field that tells you the date you're supposed to be reviewing them, giving them their annual review, just by adding fields and setting the properties. So we could add another column to this. Let's do that. To make room for it, we might have to squeeze it in. I noticed that most people's first names aren't that long, so I could squeeze that in and move that over. Date of birth, let's get that moved over to make room. And then we want something. What do we want here? Anniversary year. Their anniversary year. Or their last year's bonuses. All right, so let's grab last year's bonuses, and that's a data field. So it needs to go, and remember I can drag it or draw it and set it, but I'm going to just drag it over. So now I have last year's bonuses. I'm going to grab this, copy it, click away, paste it, move it over. Set the label, text. So it's date of birth right up here. Caption, change that to last year bonuses. Hit enter. Now I'm not seeing it all, so I'm going to make it wider. And then I'm going to line it up. Notice the left is 4515. I can click on this and see what the left is. And that one's 4410. So somebody's got to match up. 4410, fine. I'll move him. 4410. Hit enter. And they're lined up now because they have the same left. But I could have highlighted both, and I could have used the align tool. All right, so that should have last year's bonuses now on there. And let's check it out. Last year's bonuses got a lot of zeros. One thing that I forgot to do is click on last year's bonuses and look at the output format and change that from general to currency. Apply, okay. I probably still have a lot of zeros because you actually have to pay them a bonus to get something in there, right? But if they had bonuses, they would be in there. That's how easy it is to add. Now, what if I wanted to total all this up at the end? In this case, I probably don't want to because that's not the purposes of the report. But just to recap what we talked about earlier, if you want to total these up, then you want to add a text box. I know I've got salaries, so let's do the text box right there. Text box, and then the data field, what's it pertain to? It's going to be last year, so I'm looking for L, last year's salary right there. It pertains to that. Output format, it's money, so let's pick a currency. Okay. And the distinct field, summary distinct field, click on that, and you might say, wait a minute, what is that? Oh, it's the last year. How would I know? I could go back and look at one of the others. So the distinct field is last year's salary. Summary function, what do you want to do with it? If you can't remember what these do, just experiment. But sum, we want to sum them up. And then summary group, you want to sum what up? What group? Well, there's only one group. We only have one group in there. And running, those don't matter. Text field 10, I'll just do total just to give it something different, and then let's hit preview. And there, it's sitting right there at the bottom. And where is it? It's not there. Well, I thought it was going to be at the end of the report. And there it is, just sitting down there. So what happened? Well, that's a page footer. We don't have a report footer. It was removed or not added. So if I wanted to have it in the report footer, then I would drag it on there. And look, I can't. This is in the help topic, but we weren't able to give you that ability. What you have to do then is cut it and then paste it in here. You'd think that would be easy to do. Sometimes programming, the simplest things are a real difficult pain. So I'm going to put that right in there. I'm going to resize it. I want its left to be the same as this guy. That's 5940. 5940, that's the same. Its width is 1170. That's the same. So that looks pretty good. Trouble is it's left justified. I want it right justified, right there. And I probably want it to be bold. So I'm going to go to the font and make it bold. And now we'll see what happens. We'll go to the end of the report. And there it is. But I don't have any to give you. We don't have any to total up, but there it is. Oh, there's no dollar sign. How do we fix that? Bet you already know. You're like way ahead of you, dude. Output format right here. We decide if we want to have a currency symbol. Now I picked number. I actually made a mistake. I picked number. Thought I picked the right one. And then we'll do that, do that, do that. And it should be good. Looks good. Nothing to put in there, but looks good. All right, so we'll hit close, save it. Yes, I want to save it. Now let's talk about other reports, or what we call custom styles. So these are what we call reports as part of the custom data viewer. This is the data view, and there's like 200 of them, almost 200 of these. That's the custom data view, and that gives you info. And from that info, you can just right click and put it into Excel if you want, or you can build a report. But what about the various templates, as people call them a lot? Well, let's look at some of those. Let's go to the invoice list, because that's going to be the most popular place to go. And let's close that. And let's say we're trying to find a customer. I'll just randomly type some characters in there and see what we can find. All right, so we got an invoice right here. Click reports and go to print setup. Anytime you see custom styles, then you know that you can do what we were just doing for that particular record. Custom styles. So this exists for purchase orders, estimates, customer statements, and more. Now we have some in here already. You may not have any in here. You may have built some already. Let's click add new. When you do add new, it uses the default, whatever you put in here, the default. And then you can modify this, because it may be that you want to subtotal the discounts, or you might want to calculate the amount of money they would have saved if they owned an energy savings agreement. And yes, you can do that. So you'd be able to put in a field that takes 15% off, or represents 85% of the total, or the subtotal, and you could say, this is what your price would have been, or this is what you would have saved. You could do that. You have a lot of options, because remember, there's a crazy amount of fields and properties. There's a crazy amount of properties available on these fields, and some crazy calculation methods, and you can calculate on calculated fields. In the case of an invoice, we've done a pretty good job of adding all these fields for you. So you might already find the calculation that you want, meaning we've already done the math and we added a field for that. But if not, you could do it. Now, one thing that all of you are probably wanting to do, or you're asking about, is, well, how can I change this image? And you'll notice if I click on this image, it shows the properties of the image, including the picture property, and I can change it. Go find one. I can just delete it. And then what do? Well, I can add an image. go over here to the toolbar, hover over here and have a look and see what pops up. Click that. Let's draw the image. If you don't get it right, it doesn't matter because you can resize it. Draw that image out. Then come over to your picture, and it's none. Right now it says none. Click that. And then we'll go to my folder called Report Webinar. And I have an image there waiting for me. And you may have to play around with sizing this image in another software program. If you have a really large image, you might want to make it smaller. Notice the dimensions, 302 by 160. The size is 11 kilobytes, 11.4 kilobytes. You want to make that image as small as you can. The smaller you make it, the faster the page will load, because the software is not going to trim it for you. If this thing is 200 megabytes in size, and I've seen that, the form will load very slowly. And then people will call support and say, man, this is really slow. It's way slower than your demo was. Well, that could be why. You could have an image on there that's really big. So I make my images as small as I possibly can make them. Now, you can double click on this image. You don't have to hit the open button, but you can also click it and hit open. Does the same thing. Click open or just double click on whatever you're looking for. And then you got an image. Now, once it's in here, you can size it to meet your needs. Notice it's getting cut off. If you come over to the size mode, then you can clip it, stretch it, or zoom it. What do they do? Well, the easiest way to figure out what they do is just click them. Just encourage you to experiment. That's what kids do. That's how they learn so fast, and they know so much because they're not afraid. Just click it, see what happens. Hit clip. Let's go back. Resize it. It's looking pretty good. And we stop somewhere. Now, if you want to, you could have data fields that represent addresses and things like that for your company. I don't know if we have those in here, but you can also just add a label. This big label is what I did. I put in a label here, multi-line label. You'll notice that the properties again are over here. Can grow, true. Can shrink, data field, no. Max length, multi-line. Multi-line, yes or no. True. True is yes, false is no. Multi-line, meaning I want to have two, three, 4 lines. I want as many lines as I want. Well, that's multi-line true. And then I put in the text. And then that ended up right there. So you have the ability to do things like that in different ways. And you can, of course, change the text, make it bold, change the font, etc., just like you would elsewhere. All right. Remember, if you mess something up and you haven't hit save, you're okay, because you'll just close this and answer no. Do you want to save this? No. So every time you do something that you are happy with, hit save or Control S on your keyboard. Just keep doing that over and over again. And then the minute you do something that you can't reverse, and I've done that many times, it's all of us do it. Advanced users like me do it all the time. I just hit exit and say no. I do that in Excel constantly. I do that when I'm programming constantly because I'm not sure what I messed up, but I know it's wrong. And I know I saved every time I was happy. That's my advice for you. That's good advice. So this is where you'd modify your invoice. Notice there's a field up here called trans title. Well, that's a data field that came from this area here. Trans meaning transaction. Trans title. Let's go find that. Trans title. Trans title. All right, so there's trans title. What does that mean? The easiest way to figure that out really is to close. I'm not going to save it. Is just preview it and see what that does. So you pick the custom style and you hit preview and it says invoice. Where did that come from? Let's go back to print setup. Notice I had a close window when I print preview. I don't want that on there. Close window when I print preview. I don't want that. So I hit preview and it said invoice. Where did it get that information? Well, that's the transaction title, the type of transaction it is. And if you ever wanted to change that, then you have that option. Right down here, it says custom report title. Click that, click edit, and you can change the title of your sales, invoices, estimates, and credits, because you might not call an invoice an invoice. You might call it billing or something, who knows. An estimate, you might call that proposal. So it could be sales proposal. And now, when you want to use that particular one, you check the box. And when you go to preview, it will say sales proposal. Well, I don't have that. I don't have the right field up there. Let's click another one. Just wrong one. Let's do one that was set up for it. I don't have one in there. Well, if I'd set it up for that, then it would show that custom report title, the one I picked there. So that way you can change those titles around if you want to. But the easiest thing to do is just experiment, like I said. All right, where else can we do this? As I mentioned, we can go into various records and you can open the record. You don't have to keep using the menu. I'll just open this PO. Go into this PO, go to menu, go to my print setup, which isn't available because nobody's approved the PO. Maybe you know about the approval feature. You can force people to get approval before it can be emailed or printed or whatever. So we'll click print setup. And notice in the PO, we have custom styles. Anytime you see that, you get to make your own. So there's a PO. Now, we didn't create a blank, or pardon me, we didn't create a template for you to follow. You have to start from scratch. Had people ask about that. If anyone's got one, they can share it with others. But that allows you to create your own purchase order. Anytime you see custom styles, that means you can create your own for that particular record. All right, Erica, were there any questions that I needed to address with show and tell? There is one in the sample purchase orders CDV. Oh, okay. Yeah, so good. All right, so I just said there's no sample in there, and people are like, oh, I wish you'd make one for me. And we're like, hey, don't be lazy, do it yourself. And they're like, hey, that's not nice. So what's the option? Go to data views and go down to purchase orders, PO reimbursable. Where is that? Oh, starts with sample, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, okay, sample purchase orders. There it is. All right, so we got purchase order data came up. Go to reports, go to setup, add new, and there is the purchase order. And that looks very much like, if not exactly like, the purchase order that we provide you. But rather than deal with it here, you can export it. And you know what I need to do first is save it. So I'll do PO example. PO example. Description from Tom, Total Office Manager. All right, so I got it saved. Now, all I have to do is export it and give it a name. That showed up on my other screen. Give it a name and then import it from the PO area. So once I've exported it, I can just re-import it into the PO area, and I've got the PO solved. So that's how you can do it. All right. Other questions, Erica, that we should show and tell on? I'm going to hit the preview button while you're thinking about that. So look how fast that previewed. 3,432 pages, and they are loaded, by the way, all of them. 3,400 pages, and that was just seconds. If your system runs slow, then it needs to be looked into, because there are certain parts of the software, by the way, that aren't fast. They just can't be because the software does a lot. But there's other things that are just super fast, and I see people struggling with speed, and they don't have to. We should look into speed issues, but there was 3,400 pages in just 5 seconds. Erica, any final questions or things that maybe we should cover? One thing I want to remind everybody is that all of these reports are your reward for proper bookkeeping. If you come into your statement of cash flows, which tells you where your money came from and where your money went, and this report is meaningless. It has a lot of weird data, negative numbers, things that don't make sense. It's not right. The bookkeeping wasn't right. And if you come into your job costing reports or your inventory reports or your financial ratios and analysis, you see a bunch of nonsensical crud, then that's what you get for incomplete bookkeeping that's incomplete. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you're not creating POs, you're not receiving items in inventory, you're not tracking inventory, you're not receiving items and creating bills and paying your bills and setting up inventory item types and using the timesheet, et cetera, et cetera. The more you use of the software, the more the 400 reports will start helping you, and the more they'll make sense. I've had people call me angry and say, I've never got a decent financial report out of this piece of junk since we bought it. And what am I supposed to do with that information? Come do the bookkeeping? So unless there's a bug, and there could be, I mean, it's possible, it's just a matter of understanding all of bookkeeping, all the facets of bookkeeping. And bookkeeping in the old days before software was managing lots of forms, filling out lots of information, and totaling all those into ledgers. The accountants then turn those ledgers into reports. So bookkeeping was all the POs, work orders, filling out work orders, purchase orders, invoices, all the data fields, timesheets, collecting timesheets, and all that. That was bookkeeping, and the accounting was simply totaling all of it up into an income statement. So the accountants came and took all the bookkeeping, looked at all those ledger books, and then turned them into financials. And that took 2 or 3 seconds, but it would have taken a highly skilled 10 key, super fast 10 key person. It would have taken them possibly days, maybe weeks to do this. But that's all accounting is. People sometimes ask, what's the difference between accounting and bookkeeping? Bookkeepers, God love them, they gave us all the data. All this data, they gave it to us. We just totaled it up. But God love them, they created all this information. We totaled it up, assuming that they collected the data correctly, and assuming we totaled it up all correctly, all this will be right. Some people will say software is hard to use, too many steps. You've seen that on Aptora Pros. Hopefully you're on Facebook Aptora Pros. Well, a lot of that is too many steps means there's too many things to pick. I don't want to pick departments. I don't want to pick the purchase order. I don't want to pick a service agreement. I don't want to pick this stuff. Don't. You don't have to pick anything except in the case of an invoice, there's just a customer and you have to have at least one item. Just one item. That's it. Then you can close it. Well, but I can't get a decent report out of this junky thing. Well, that's because you're not picking all these items, all the different selectors, because It'll give you departmentalized reports. It'll give you information on callbacks, callback ratios, who has the most callbacks, how much the callbacks cost you, what are your senior citizen discounts, how often do you offer them, what is their impact on revenue, blah, 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 but only happens with bookkeeping. All right, Erica, any final written words? Because you can't talk. That's why I said written. Got your little hand up. Got your electronic hand up. David has a question. Let's see here. David. I'm not seeing him in the list with a question. If anybody has a question, they can put their hand up. I'll take questions, and you can even, you can type it in or use your microphone. Let's see here. Why is the item photo field not an available field? Hang on just a second. Let me get into that. Okay, here it is. Why is the item photo field not an available field in custom forms for estimates? Oh, item photo field. Okay. So that would be the field for the, yeah. We can look into that. As you know, just so everybody knows what he's talking about, when you create an item, one of the things that you can do is associate images with that item. And you can have many. And you can set one of them as your primary or your default, we might call it. And so he was wondering, why do we have the image in there as a field? And I will write that down and look into that. It's possible, David, that we tried it one time and had problems with it. It may be that we would no longer have problems with it. But I will write this down. Pardon the pause here, just a minute. All right, I wrote that down. Yeah, it's possible that we tried that once. It created problems, or it was a problem. It may be that it's not a problem anymore. It could be we just never thought about it. So I'll look into that, see what we can do. All right. Any other questions? I'm looking in the chat window. I don't see any. I think Erica has them all answered. Okay. No more. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. Just another reminder, please join me on Field Service Live on YouTube. Go to YouTube, Field Service Live. Search for that as one word, or it's YouTube/Field Service Live every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. Love to see you there. The advantage of live is that you can ask questions, but it will be recorded and you can listen to it later. And I will look forward to seeing you on Aptora Pros. You probably notice I'm all over that place. I really enjoy getting questions from people and feedback, so I hope to see all of you on there as much as possible. Thanks, everyone. We'll make this recording available next couple of days on YouTube. Send out links to it. Erica, thank you very much. I know you weren't feeling good. Appreciate you typing away and helping us out. Goodbye, everybody.